Hi there, I'm Wendy McCallum, burnout and alcohol coach and wellness expert, and you're listening to Bite Size Balance, where everyday extraordinary women share their stories, expertise, and wisdom, all in the name of lifting each other up and creating a better life by design. Whether it's wellness, career, relationships, food, alcohol, mindfulness, hormones, or parenting, we talk about all things women's balance. If your life looks great on paper, but it still feels like something's missing, you're in the right place. Welcome to Bite Size Balance.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Bite Size Balance. I am so excited to be here today with my really special guest, Casey Davidson. Hi, Casey. How are you?
Hey, I'm good. It's so good to be here.
Yeah, it's going to be such a good conversation. I can't wait. We have so much in common. And the topic that we're speaking about today is just so near and dear to my heart. And I know it's something that you're really passionate about as well. So let me tell you a little bit about Casey for anybody who doesn't know Casey. So Casey's a professional life coach and the host of the Hello Someday podcast, which is a podcast for busy women who want to drink less and live more. It's actually in the top 1% of podcasts globally. So, and it's such a great podcast if you haven't listened to it yet. She's a wife and a mom who spent 20 years climbing the corporate ladder while holding on tightly to her love of red wine. Casey specializes in working with women with full calendars and overflowing to-do lists who are doing all the things and then drinking to forget all the things. When I read that, Casey, I was like, oh my gosh, that is me. That's who I used to be. And that's also who I work with. So again, this is why I think we're going to have such a great conversation today, because I think the demographic that you and I serve and speak to is so similar. So welcome again. I would love it if you would start by just telling people a little bit about your story, because it's really cool. Like, just let people know how you got to where you are, which is, you know, a life coach who really specializes in helping busy women deal with overwhelm and drink less and just create a more resonant, fulfilling life.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to connect with you. Your story is so similar to my story. And I think our story is similar to so many women out there. I mean, I think that before I stopped drinking, I had a real idea that it was like, either you have a serious problem with alcohol, meaning that there are external consequences and, you know, you have to put yourself in the alcoholic category, because that's kind of all I knew, or you were okay. And I spent a lot of years really trying with everything I could to moderate my relationship with, for me, it was red wine. I was a red wine girl. And to do so that very clearly, and like not even subconsciously, but consciously, so that I would never have to stop drinking. I mean, that was what I knew I needed to do and what I wanted to do. And, you know, I think that it kept me stuck for a long time, the idea that I wasn't, quote unquote, that bad. And I spent a lot of time debating whether I would ever be that bad, if that makes sense.
Tell me more about that. Listen, everything you're saying, like I said, I mean, I drank the red wine. That was my poison of choice. And I could not fathom a life without alcohol. Like, it just never crossed my radar for years. I did exactly the same thing. Like, how can I keep this thing in my life and keep going? That was really my primary goal. So tell me more about what you mean by that?
Well, I mean, I think the thing is that I knew for a very long time that I drank more than I should. And I loved drinking. I mean, since the first time I did it in college, like actually the first time I did it in high school, I was chugging. I don't think I've told this story, but the first time I did in high school, I was away for a weekend with my girlfriends. It was the night before my parents were flying back from Africa. They are foreign service officers overseas, so worked with the American embassies. I was in boarding school, and my girlfriend was basically having a party just with 8 of us. And we were out in her backyard, hanging around a fire pit and playing drink while you think, but with hard alcohol, with Bacardi. And I was pretending to think longer so that I could chug it, because I so wanted to know what it felt like to be drunk, and like not just to get a buzz, but to be like super drunk. Well, what ended up happening, go figure, because I had never really drank a lot before. I ended up like beyond blacked out, right? I was like attempting to crawl up a hill for hours, puked all over myself, in my hair. Don't remember going upstairs. My friends obviously took care of me, put me to bed, and my dad showed up the next morning. I adored my father. And I, basically like was trying to pretend I was okay. He thought it was hysterical. He loved the movie Animal House, even though he wasn't a huge drinker himself. And, he was kind of a nerd. So he thought drinking was like the cool thing. He said, "Oh, you have your license. Why don't you drive the car?" Knowing I was brutally hungover. I had to pull the car on the side of the road to throw up on the highway, trying to pretend that like, oh, I don't know what, like I just get car sick. I also, while my sister's graduation class was walking down the aisle, my grandparents was there, my mother was there. I had to jump up, run across them, and literally run in front of the procession to throw up on the side of the building. And I mean, this is insanity. And my mom was clearly not happy. She said to me afterwards, we're a good WASP family and we don't talk about stuff. She said, you could have picked a more appropriate time. That was her entire feedback. My grandmother handed me some mints, and my father thought it was hysterical. And I didn't see my parents very often. I just didn't. They lived overseas. I went to boarding school. I had never really drank before. I was such a good girl because I was afraid of getting expelled. If you drank on campus, you got suspended first time, expelled the second time. There were plenty of people who did it, but I just felt like I literally had nowhere to go. So first time I drank, I absolutely loved it. Got to college and suddenly was like, oh my God, I can drink. This is so fun. Drank my way through college. And then, what I drank kind of shifted to what was socially acceptable at the time. So early 20s, it was drinking at bars with my friends and dancing. When I moved to Seattle with my then boyfriend, now husband, it was sort of like beers on camping trips and wine on our deck. Got married, did the whole like dual income, no kids, hang out with all our friends, have giant dinner parties, became a mom, and bought in fully to the mommy wine culture. Whole time, climbing the corporate ladder, drinking was both the way I got out of my head to have fun and relax and let loose. I was, definitely a gold star girl. So I actually wanted to get so drunk that I could turn off my responsible brain and like, quote unquote, anything could happen. And then it was how I managed stress. I had a big corporate job pretty young, kept climbing the corporate ladder and getting promoted, and had the full imposter syndrome the entire time, and didn't realize the degree to which drinking was contributing to my anxiety and feeling like I couldn't cope. And then when I was a mom, it, suddenly all my other outlets for having fun as an adult kind of went away. I used to take guitar lessons. I used to do Pilates. I used to, do all the things. And suddenly I was like working, running out the door to pick up my son before daycare closed, going home and, making dinner, giving baths, getting him to bed, waking up when he was screaming at 3 a.m. For food, driving him to daycare. The adrenaline never went away. And so that was me. And I truly spent a lot of years completely oblivious to what was going on, meaning like I didn't even realize that why I woke up at 3 a.m. with the crushing anxiety and racing mind was because of the alcohol I was consuming. I hung out with a lot of big drinkers who were also really successful women. I mean, doctors and lawyers and, VPs and all this stuff. It was just our friends. And so I'm sure I cultivated them on purpose. So it was the whole like drink hard, play hard. We're still quote unquote cool. I would go away for wine tasting weekends with my friends and like bring my 2-year-old, including with like a little doctor's kit with all his people, and bring them out of wineries. It was a huge part of my identity. And I knew it was a problem. I used to walk into work like debating, like, do I just abuse alcohol or am I a quote unquote alcoholic? Because that was the only two categories other than I knew I wasn't a normal drinker, right? And so I would, go into work with a brutal hangover, stop at Starbucks for my big breakfast sandwich so I could absorb it, get my coffee, talk shit to myself, and then work really, really hard and do it all over again. And that was how I lived. And I did stop once when my son was 5. If I'm being honest, it was because I was really unhappy in my marriage, which looking back is crazy. I love my husband. He's a great guy. It was drinking that made me defensive and resentful. And I'm sure me pulling away from him when I was drinking, because I was having a party on my couch by myself, made him pull away and do more things with other people. So I went to a therapist who specialized in addiction and anxiety. And I went in there and said, oh my God, I need to talk to you about my anxiety, my boss, my husband, my kid, my boss, my schedule. And by the way, I'm drinking a bottle of wine a night. And he was sober. He had gone through AA and he was like, yeah, let's talk about your drinking. And I was like, no, you didn't hear me. I want to talk about my boss and how my husband doesn't support me. And he was like, yep, let's talk about your drinking. So he encouraged me to go to AA. I did. It was sort of the start of my path, and it wasn't for me. And it actually, trust me, I've been sober for 6.5 years. I have so many friends who love AA, and it's helped them a lot. For me, it ended up reinforcing the idea that I was not that bad, that they just said things that didn't resonate with me, like it's jails, institutions, or death. And for the unfortunate few, XYZ, and hand it over to your higher power. And my sponsor told me to get on my knees and pray. And I happen to be an agnostic / probably atheist, but I don't like to dive into that too much, meaning I don't debate it in the same way I don't debate, am I an alcoholic? And so I went back to drinking, had my daughter, went back to drinking after I had her pretty quickly. And 2 years later, got to the same point of feeling like I couldn't cope. I was really unhappy. I couldn't figure out why. And knew enough by that point that it was the alcohol, knew enough that every hangover, every fuzzy memory, every feeling like I couldn't cope, all the guilt, I knew it was the alcohol. And so the second time I decided to stop, I hired a sober coach. And that was kind of what I needed. She did not label me. She just said, drinking doesn't suit you. It was actually Belle from Tired of Thinking About Drinking. I love her.
Yeah, I used to get her emails. That just reminded me, and it's something I actually completely had forgotten. But in my early days, I signed up for that. I'm assuming you were getting those too.
Yeah.
She has that email sequence, and it was just like a pep talk every day in my mailbox.
It was
so
positive
great
and proactive. There were no labels. She counteracted a lot of the ingrained ideas that I had, that I was like, that you had to be a selfish person to drink too much, that you were by definition needed to make amends, that, you had a character defect, all of that stuff. She just said, no one needs to drink, and it's the alcohol, and drinking doesn't suit you, and you'll feel better without it. And I, coached with her. I emailed her every day for like 2 years. On my podcast, I actually interviewed her, which was crazy. From like, hey, I started with you on day one. And it was the approach I needed. And I am so grateful that now, with the work you do, with your podcast, with the work so many women do, with what I do, that it is so much more mainstream, that there are a lot of people struggling with problematic drinking, binge drinking. It's so normalized that the substance is addictive, that it'll drag you down mentally, emotionally, physically, that there's nothing actually wrong with you. You became addicted to an addictive substance, and that life after you stop drinking is pretty amazing.
Oh, I love that. Wow. I can't even there's so many pieces of that that as you were talking, I was trying to make notes so I could go back and just tell you how many bits of that are exactly the way it was with me. Having that reckoning with the therapist, first of all, I wish I'd had someone to say something to me. No one said anything to me, again, because objectively, I think it didn't look problematic from the outside. But that feeling I'd had for years, that feeling of something's missing. I need to get out of here. I need to escape. And I would drink. And now I look back on it. I'm like, what on earth was I trying to escape from? And I realized, oh, hold on. It was the drinking. But I totally resonated with that when you said that about just feeling like something was off and wrong and trying to find all these people to blame it on when really it was probably mostly the alcohol. And then of course, the 3 a.m. waking up, and just, it took me forever to realize that was connected to the drinking. And it wasn't really until even when I was getting up and Googling, am I an alcoholic at 3 a.m, I still didn't realize that the reason I was waking up was, chemically because of what was going on in my body. And when I figured that out, I think I probably learned that from Annie Grace, but when I figured that out, I was like, oh my gosh, for years, I'd just been in this cycle around that. So thank you for giving us all of that background. I think so many women listening to this are going to say, oh, I feel that. I really want to focus in. You and I talked before we recorded. We talked about what could we talk about, because we do have, there's a lot of overlap in our stories and what we do. And we wanted to talk about something fresh that we haven't talked about yet, certainly on bite-sized balance. And that is something that I'm really, really passionate about. And that is kind of this idea of what's possible for women post-alcohol. So you just touched on that at the very end of your story, the fact that life without alcohol is actually really amazing. And one of the things you and I were talking about in our pre-interview chat was how often we see this in the lives of the women that we work with, but then also how this has happened for both of us, in that we both have had this kind of amazing period of personal growth and change post becoming alcohol free. Do you want to share what that looked like for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that, quitting drinking was literally my worst case scenario in my life. I mean, it was, I thought that I would never have fun again. I thought that I would go through the rest of my life feeling deprived, that quote unquote, having to stop drinking would be like I was a 16-year-old who got my car keys taken away because I'd abused my privileges, and it has turned out to be so empowering and, just liberating. And I did not realize the degree to which my drinking, the substance, touched every area of my lives. Like once I stopped drinking, my marriage was better, go figure. I felt more known and loved and supported. I was better able to advocate for myself. I truly was able to even internally identify what I wanted and needed. Because before I didn't even know I had an emotion and I drank a bottle of wine. I was pissed off. I drank. I was happy. I drank. I was bored. I drank. I mean, all the things, right? Mm-hmm. And then once you stop drinking, you're like, I want to drink. I mean, in the early days, why? Oh, I'm resentful. Okay, why am I resentful? Because I feel like this is unfair. Okay, do something about it. Lay down a boundary, say something, do something for yourself. I didn't realize when I was drinking how much victim thought I had, which again is crazy. I mean, it just takes so much of your power and your objectivity away and really colors your mind into a negative mental state. Because I was thinking that I was really unhappy and that drinking was, how I made myself happy. And the truth is, I was making myself more unhappy, and I had complete power over my life. I was just in this place of sort of fear and victimhood and negativity. And that's not to say that I didn't have a great life and I didn't enjoy it, because I did. I had, two beautiful children. I had been married 14 years. We're hitting 20 years now in September. Had a gorgeous house, had friends that I really loved. I did interesting things. I took great vacations. I had a objectively really great job. And I felt like I couldn't cope with my life. And so once I removed the alcohol, it took a while, right? The beginning's really hard. Mm-hmm. When I hit 4 months, I had this huge anxiety panic attack related to, significant triggers at work with my team over, turning over and my boss being really, really hard. But I was also really pissed that like removing the thing I loved the most, drinking, didn't like solve everything in my life, right? Like I was like, dude, I gave up my red wine. How the hell am I not fixed? Like seriously pissed about it. But I also knew that drinking wasn't a solution. As Belle said, drinking just adds a problem to an existing problem. And so I finally was like, all right, I went into my doctor and I was like, here's the thing. I can't feel this way anymore. And I can't go back to drinking. So you have to help me, And she did. I mean, she got me, to go to therapy with an amazing therapist. I did EMDR therapy. I had, because I was 4 months sober, some good coping skills. I got so much more. I finally dealt with my anxiety, both through medication and therapy, without drinking on top of it. And kind of realized that I probably my entire life had an undiagnosed mild mood disorder that had kept coming and going and making me have no confidence because I was afraid of when it would come back. I thought it was, a personal failing. And turned out I had a mood disorder. And I never would have recognized it had I kept drinking because it was too muddied. I blamed myself. I couldn't get clarity on what was happening because I was always like spiking my dopamine off the charts and then waking up in this huge low, blaming myself. I was jittery because of hangovers. So all that is to say, once I stopped drinking, I was able to finally deal with all the stuff underneath, both emotional and like chemical. That was why I started drinking, and it worked for me in the first place. And by finally doing that, I was no longer living in a space where I felt like I couldn't cope with life. I had time, I had energy, I thought I was worth it. I started like not people pleasing as much and actually putting up boundaries. I mean, just subtle ones, even with people who loved me, even asking more of my husband, who was a good guy, but I was that mom who did everything right. I was the person who spent all day doing everything for everyone else, keeping all the balls in the air, and then drank and then blamed myself for feeling overwhelmed. So once I stopped drinking, the whole world opened up. Once finally I got help because I was no longer hiding a bunch of shit. I was no longer going to my therapist and talking about my boss and my husband and whatever, and like sitting on the fact that I was like drinking a ton and constantly sort of hungover and spent. So I went in there and I was like, I'm exercising, I'm getting support, I'm not drinking, I'm taking breaks, and here's how I still feel. And it wasn't as bad. I would say when I stopped drinking, maybe 60 or 70% of it got better. But like I said, with the mood disorder, it came back occasionally. And so she was amazing. I got so much more support. By being honest, I no longer felt defensive and guilty. And I'm not saying honest, like thought I was a horrible person and made amends to everyone, because I truly did believe that the only person I was hurting was myself. Honestly, I was giving too much to everybody else, including my kids, including my boss, including my coworkers and my husband. I had very little left for myself. And so, at the end of the day, after a couple of years, I, turned to my husband and was just like, I don't want to do this job anymore. I don't want my boss's job. I don't want to do this for 10 more years. I don't even want to do this for 2 years or tomorrow. And I was making, 3 times what he was making. I was a director at L'Oreal. I had this pretty glamorous looking job, flying to, Chicago and San Francisco and New York and all this stuff, and realized that I had always been the square peg in this round hole. And what I loved, I was a sociology and American studies major. I loved looking at what forces influenced women to act in the way they did, understanding not only individuals, but large groups of people. I went into marketing because I was fascinated by it, and was always kind of into self-help because I was always trying to feel better. And once I stopped drinking, I was like, you know what? I can make money doing other things. I'm not, trapped with my mortgage and my kids who I want to support and love. I believe in myself. I want to take a chance on myself. I want to study coaching. I want to study why the hell we all drink so much and believe it's the end all be all. So I did that while working this full-time job, still having 2 young kids. Like, I was able to go to coaching school nights and weekends, start coaching nights and weekends on top of my life. Whereas before I could barely get through the day because I wasn't drinking. I had all this time and energy. And so I became a coach. I coached for about a year while I was working. I decided to go full time. I've been doing this full time as my job for 2.5 years. I was able to start a podcast, which just is my favorite thing, talking to women like you and learning and exploring subjects and getting really deep. And I am so much happier than I was when I was drinking. And it was hard to believe at the time.
Wow. Isn't it? It's so crazy, Casey. I mean, we did talk before this, just so everyone knows. I do know a little bit about Casey, but I just, as I'm listening to you talk, I'm like, oh my gosh. So I am writing. This is one of the things I've discovered as a alcohol-free person that was missing from my life. I probably would have blamed it on, blamed the feeling or assigned the feeling to, I don't know, gosh knows, like I would have blamed it on a million other things. But what it really was is that I hadn't had any creativity in my life really since I started practicing law. And it was really a big hole for me because it was always something I did as a kid. So I started writing anyway. Point of all this is I'm writing. I've written about all these things you're talking about. One of the things I wrote about a couple of weeks ago was this idea of self-help and all of these years of like trying to fix myself by reading every single book out there, and how I just recently have gotten to a place where I went out for a walk without my headphones on. Just didn't even think about it. Didn't put my headphones on. Whereas, for years, especially right after I stopped drinking, I was listening to podcasts like every single day. I just needed something to stay connected to the issue. And I, by the way, for anyone listening, I think that's a great idea. Like throw the book at it in the beginning. But it was really interesting that I went out and I had been walking for about 15 minutes when I realized I wasn't listening to anything and I didn't care. And kind of had this reflective moment where I realized that I was no longer afraid of what I might tell myself. Like I was willing to just walk around and think and not be afraid of what would come out of that. And I think what I realized is that I'm done with the self-help and I don't need anyone to tell me, what I need more of, what I need less of, what the next steps are for me. It's this kind of feeling like, that voice that's always been there is now one that I can confidently listen to. And it was a really big deal for me to have that moment. And when you were talking, that was making me think about that. Because I think you were talking about how when we stop drinking, it obviously frees up time. When I think about the hours I spent thinking about drinking, it frees up all this time. It also obviously allows for increased energy because we're not, feeling hungover and, sleeping better and all the rest of it. But the thing for me that's has been present for me, and I know I've had other women reflect back the same thing, is that there's this newfound confidence that comes from actually dealing with the thing that you thought you would never, first of all, that you never wanted to change. But then when you realized you might actually want to change it, you thought it would be impossible. And then you do it. And it's like this confidence just spills out into all other areas of your life. Does that resonate with you?
Oh, completely. Yeah. I mean, completely. And it starts in small ways. I think, for so many of us who want to moderate our drinking or stop drinking and try to and give up on day 4 or day 5 or week 2 or night 2, we get in the habit of quitting on ourselves. I mean, saying we're going to do something and then not doing it and waking up feeling bad about it. I mean, I used to wake up and my first thought is, what the hell is wrong with you? Get your shit together. That was my first thought in the morning. Yeah, I would put on my eyeliner and look at my bloodshot, watery eyes and not want to make eye contact with my husband. I would go downstairs to get the coffee and kind of, if I had opened a second bottle of wine the night before, on a weekday when I had to get my kids up in the morning, go to work, I would sort of hold up the second bottle of wine with one eye open and see, hey, is there 3/4 left in the bottle or just 1/4, as a gauge for how bad my day was going to be.
Right.
That was the energy that I started my day with. Mm-hmm. And I would go into work with the biggest smile on my face, totally overcompensating, all the fight or flight adrenaline in my body, trying to make it through. And once I stopped drinking, I remember vividly, I stopped drinking on February 18th. On April 24th, because it was my son's birthday, I remember I ran my first 10K in probably 7 years by myself on the day of his birthday, which was amazing because usually, I would be planning the hours of his birthday so I could either drink mimosas or wine at them to be social and make it a party with the other parents and, be stressed out running around to do it. Instead, it was the morning of his birthday. I was relaxed. I was confident. I got up. I drove myself to the race. I ran it on my own, picked up his cake on the way back. And I remember in that last mile, trust me, I was not fast, but my goal was to run the whole thing. I was early sobriety. And when I quit drinking, I was 40 pounds overweight, but I was almost in tears and tingling. And what was going through my mind was, I am now a person who does what I say I'm going to do. And I was almost in tears, bursting with pride for myself. I mean, it was so emotional. And trust me, I had not felt that way. I mean, ever, maybe.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing? We have these big jobs, your job was big, my job was big. We're really, really good at what we do. And we still are just consistently, at least I was every single day, just undermining my own confidence with this habit. And it wasn't just my confidence about not being able to drink. It was my confidence in all other areas of my life. And the things that I have done since, I think, are really rooted in that confidence piece. That's really where it all stems from. The fact that I finally said to my husband, hold on, I gave up my job to look after these kids. And yeah, I've been coaching now for over 12 years, but for the first 7 or 8 years I was coaching, it was just like a part-time job for me because I was really focused on these 2 kids, and that's fine. I don't in any way regret that. But I did say to him, you built this really big deal. You spent the last, whatever it's been, 18 years building this really successful company. And I haven't done that yet. And I need to know I can do that. And I'm actually going to put this in the self-care category and go and do it. And I will not be retiring with you at 55. So yeah. I think we get this confidence from this decision, and it really can't be underscored. I loved how you described it with just getting up every single morning and just saying to yourself, why are you doing this to yourself every day? The other thing that you and I talked about that I think is really tied into this, Casey, is the idea of how impossible it is for most of us to live a life in alignment with our values, which is something that you and I do a lot of work around as life coaches. But how impossible it is to live a life in alignment with our values when we're drinking. So, I mean, just like a real nutshell, just for anyone who's listening, we're talking about values. We're really talking about, and you may, if you have anything to add to this, go for it, Casey. But I always say it's like the things that really make us tick, they have to be in place in order for us to feel like all is right in the world. And we're not talking about, manners or morals or any of these, external societally imposed things. We're talking about the things that make you, you. And, when I started doing work around this, I was alcohol free. When I did my training as a generalized life coach, I had just become alcohol free. Like I was maybe 8 months. And we did values work in the training that I was in, and I'd flown to like Toronto or something. And I was doing this training, and, we started mining for values and trying to articulate them and come up with this list of kind of core, priority values. And I remember looking at the list and thinking, absolutely none of these things are possible for me if I'm a drinker.
Wow.
None of them. It was like authenticity is one of my core values. Like I just show up as I am. I'm very honest. I'm very willing to share and be vulnerable. How on earth is that possible when I'm drinking every night to escape my life and I'm literally not myself because of a drug? It's crazy.
Yeah.
And I see that all the time when I'm working with women. And I think it's a big piece of how, why this transformation is possible for women on the other side of alcohols, because all of a sudden, these things that really matter to them are actually possible for them. And they can actually design, create, and live a life that is in alignment with that. And if something's missing, like creativity, for example, for me, I couldn't see that when I was drinking. I wasn't even looking for it. I was just like, oh, like you said, I feel bad, I'm going to drink. I feel happy, I'm going to drink. Right. So even articulating what's missing is impossible when you're drinking like that. But definitely would have been very challenging for me, even if I'd known it was missing, to try to get back in my life. I didn't have any time. I was one of those people who was like, my day is so full, I don't have time for anything else, saying yes to every single thing out there. So I just wonder what you thought about about the whole values piece. And if you saw that play out for yourself.
I see that play out in so many areas. And like you said, when you were talking, there were like 4 different things that I wanted to dig into that you were talking about. I mean, I think the first thing is, for you, I know it's authenticity. For me, it's integrity. Mm-hmm. And just want, I first, like, I feel like guilt is the worst feeling in the entire world. Like truly, like that just crushes me. And it's, it's not, back in the day, like literally my husband's like, you're the worst liar I've ever met in my life, and I don't lie about big things. But it's because I just anyway, I'm a terrible liar. And yet I was moving through my life pretending. I didn't want anyone to look too closely at me. I was worried that they would judge me because I was judging myself. And so, living in integrity for me, it's that feeling of freedom. Like I have nothing to hide. If I make a mistake, it's because I'm human. It's not because I'm guilty, and just that freedom. I mean, people can judge me, but I know, to borrow a phrase from AA, because they do have a lot of wisdom, my side of the street is clean, I apologize freely. I don't hide things. Trust me, on my podcast, everybody knows everything, but I don't even do that. Like some women are like, it's so brave of you to share this stuff. And I'm just kind of like, I don't feel like it's brave because I'm not ashamed of it. Right. You know what I mean? Like even when I was talking about going to AA, I don't feel like I did anything that bad. Like I truly am like, yeah, I got addicted to an addictive substance. It was incredibly hard to kick it because it's working as designed. Things I did, I'm like, some of them are funny. Some of them are really unfortunate. But I'm not ashamed of them. And that is a beautiful, beautiful feeling. The other thing I realized when I got in, stopped drinking was because I was less afraid of judgment and I felt good about myself and I knew my side of the street was clean. I was able, I call myself a recovering people pleaser, but I was able to actually stop worrying about what other people thought of me. And, again, I did get a lot from the 12-step program, probably not what they necessarily thought I would get, but like the idea of, do I want what they have, has really helped me, because it's enabled, I was always afraid of not measuring up, of people thinking I wasn't good enough. Like that fell into the whole imposter syndrome thing.
Yeah.
When I stopped drinking, I was like, do I actually respect them? And not in a judgy way, but like, do I respect their choices? Do I want that for myself? Do I like their values? Do I like the way they operate in the world? Do I want their lives? Because if I don't, and this, sort of often appears in power dynamics, like in your job or with your boss, who by definition evaluates you. How are you doing? Right. And can reward you or punish you in some respect. I was like, if I do not please my boss, then I'm doing something right if I don't want his or her life, if I don't want to follow their path. Yeah. And that gave me a lot of confidence. In fact, it gave me the confidence to leave my job, because I saw what was ahead of me on the rings, the rungs of the ladder. And I didn't want that. Mm-hmm. And so I actually remember this. And again, I don't know if I've said this, but like I was, sober. I had quit drinking. I was maybe a year and a half in, and my lot of turnover in my company as happens. And my GM, the head of our entire brand division, came to me because people above me had left and they wanted me to stay. And she was like, what is it that you want, Casey? And she was a really successful woman. She traveled a ton. She had 2 young kids. She was away a lot. No judgment, just it wasn't what I wanted for my life. And she, was saying stuff like, is 25% travel too much? Because most people at the next level traveled 50%. I was like, that's a week of every month. Yeah, that's too much. I've got a 3-year-old, I want to be there. And she was like, what is it that you want, Casey? So I can help you get that. Do you want more power? Do you want more scope? Do you want more breadth? Do you want, all these big things, right? And I felt like I was like, the wolf, gnawing off his hand to be free from the trap. I looked at her and I was like, I want to be a life coach. And we were in this conference room and she stared at me, and I've never seen her speechless before in her entire life. I mean, this woman is a badass in business. And she was like, what? And I said, I want to be a life coach, which she just was like, I literally don't know what to do with that. Like, and I felt like I was practically in tears. I mean, it was such a moment of honesty and also like just self-preservation, because I was about to be promoted into this job that I desperately knew would suck all the time and energy out of me. Mm-hmm. And I went outside and I talked to my coworkers and I was like, y'all are never going to believe what I just did. And they were like, you said what? And it was basically like, you will not get promoted. You will not be moved into this position, but that's what I wanted. Right. And like, it was just, I felt so free and so powerful. And I came home and told my husband, he was like, all right. Like, cause it was just like so opposite. I was like, and then I started talking about it. I was like, I went to coaching school and I really want to help women and I want to do this. And she was just like wide eyed, like the headlight, like the funniest career moment of my life.
But I love the integrity, like that whole, like how I love that piece about how we're really not behaving with integrity if we are doing things that actually are doing things to please people who are doing things that aren't in alignment with who we want to be and what we want to do. And I think the most profound, and I'm not going to do it justice because I can't remember exactly how it was articulated, but the most profound thing I ever heard about people pleasing was that it really is just completely disingenuous.
Oh my God, it's a
control. You're not showing up with honesty. It's not serving you and it's not serving the other person, because you're now doing something and pretending you want to do it when you really don't want to do it at all, which is leading, for someone like you and me, it's leading to resentment, which is leading to drinking. And it's like, if this person actually knew what they were asking you was actually leading to, they'd probably be appalled. But they have no idea, because we're just showing up with a big smile on our faces saying, yeah, we'll do this. I'll take this. I'll do that. That just reminded me
of this anxiety, this resentment. I would drink, and I knew that me traveling 25, 50% of the time in a hotel room in New York by myself, going to business dinners and being completely stressed out by presentations where they would try to pick my ideas apart. Oh my God, that would be horrible for my sobriety. That would be a nightmare.
Sure.
Yeah. And so it was integrity, but also like I realized that I always thought that my core values were responsibility and financial security. That was really important to me. And I realized those were all fear-based values, not truly core values that lit me up. That, when I look back at my life, I want to like people to say these things about me, And so I realized my values were connection and happiness. I just wanted to be happy and I wanted to explore the world, and beauty. I wanted to see beautiful places. I wanted to feel beauty in my life. And so, in coaching, like, some people are surprised that like service isn't one of my core values. And it's not, it's integrity and connection. I like get as much out of the women I connect with, deeply coaching, having meaningful conversations, like looking at what are your dreams and what do you want and how can you get it and what's been holding you back. Like just being super actionable and real, but like I get from those relationships. I hate shallow surface conversations where you're posturing to pretend who has it most together. Or I feel like pretending how busy you are is like another form of posturing, right? I'm such a selfless person. I'm so busy. I have no time for yourself. In my mind, that's like, posturing too.
Oh, it's so embarrassing too. I think back about it on like things I used to say and how I got like a little kind of buzz from telling people that I hadn't slept in a week, or I've been on the road, and I hadn't seen my kids, and all of it is just, me using productivity as my currency and my worth and all the rest of it. But I think, oh my gosh. So we could talk for hours.
Yeah, I know we could.
I'm like, there's so much for us to talk about here. When you were talking before about how it felt to be drinking, I was thinking about this thing that, again, I don't know where I heard this, but it really stuck with me. This idea that really our drinking years act to basically arrest our development. So it's like a lot of the women that I work with, when I ask them when the last time was, like, so if they can think back to a time when alcohol wasn't running the show, maybe they were kind of drinking, I'm putting this in air quotes, normally, whatever that looks like. They weren't thinking about it all the time. When they think back to that time and ask them where they were then in terms of their personal development, it looks exactly like where they are when they finally get, like when they're just at the early stages of being alcohol free. It's like nothing actually happens. You just stay where you are. And I can look back at like that 20-year period. I mean, lots of amazing things happened in my life. Like you, I had 2 kids and, we did all kinds of really great things. And, but I think from a personal growth standpoint, I didn't grow. I just kind of stayed the same and stayed in a lot of those. I love how you said that you thought your values were something different. I never looked at my values before maybe 5-6 years ago. But I think if you'd asked me what my values were, I would have said some of the same things as you. Probably even worse, Casey, I would have put my most dreaded thing, which by the way, people, is not a value, perfectionism, on the list of values, right?
Right.
Like all about me taking care of other people and being the good girl and making the choices that people thought I should make. And none of it was really based in what I actually knew I wanted for myself. And again, coming back to what I was talking about, it's because I did not know to listen to the voice. I didn't trust it.
Yeah.
I was worried what it was going to say. And why would I trust it? Half the time it was telling me I was a piece of shit. Yes. And I couldn't do any of the things that I should be able to do.
You know what I was thinking when you were saying that? You talked about how your development is arrested, like it's paused. And I think when you're drinking, it's actually a little bit worse than that, meaning you're being dulled. The life is being sucked out of you.
Yes.
You're getting further and further. You're not just paused and not developing, you're getting further away from who you're meant to be.
Yeah.
I actually have a quote on my wall in my office that says, maybe the journey isn't about becoming anything. Maybe it's about unbecoming all the things that were never really you, so you can be who you were meant to be in the first place.
Yes.
I mean,
love
that
this.
like just tingles.
Yes. The very end of that self-help essay that I wrote, the very last line is, it's never too late to be who you always were.
Yes.
And that's how I feel. I feel like we get to the end of this, whatever it looks like for us, this time with alcohol, and we break free from it. And it's just, I think for every woman that I've worked with, there's this moment, and it's so beautiful because it often happens in coaching, or I'll get an email or a text from someone who's, I haven't talked to for a while, and they'll say, this is what I did today. Or guess what? You're never going to believe this. This is what I've done. And it's always great to hear it, but it's actually not that surprising to me, because I see it happening over and over and over again, where women get this confidence and this courage to take these risks, and you're actually acting, you can trust yourself. So you know that you can start a podcast like you did and like I did. You can start a new career. You can leave a relationship that's not serving you. You can, pick up a new hobby, or maybe an old hobby that you haven't picked up for a long time. And it's, for me, it just connects right back to these kind of core things that we're talking about. The fact that you're no longer in arrested or regressive development, the fact that your values are now have space to actually be expressed and honored. And the fact that you have this incredible amount of confidence as a result of doing like the thing you thought was the hardest, most impossible thing in the world.
And I was telling you before, one of my favorite things about the work that we do is when I work with women, I call myself a sobriety and life coach, and that's what I am. And here's the thing. I work with almost all women, I know you do too, who are pretty high achieving women who've gotten in the habit of drinking too much or too often and are trying to stop and can't, or haven't been successful yet on their own. And the first part of the work we do, it's every single woman is different. Their home situations are different, whether they have kids or they don't, whether they stay at home or they work, whether their partner is a big drinker or that person wants them to quit, or whether they're single, how old they are they empty nesters? Do they have, young kids? That is all different. But the process of quitting drinking is very similar in terms of like the steps you need to take, the fears you have about life without alcohol, the cravings and how you deal with them, the emotions you go through, the sadness of giving up a drink, and then regret for the time, and the anger at the alcohol industry. And all that is very similar in my mind. The emotions, the process. Once, women get to about 60 days alcohol free, that's when we shift into sobriety coaching as the foundation that helps them get unstuck, and life coaching is primary. And that is my favorite part, because the process is very similar up until 60 days. But once you shift to life coaching, every single woman's process is different. What they want, what they push down, what they're afraid of, what's holding them back, how to let go of that. And I'm fascinated and excited for them. And I always tell them, I don't know where they're going to go. Like, the goal to remove alcohol from your life, that's a presenting problem we deal with. You get rid of that. It's like you've been running a marathon your whole life with a ball and chain tied to your ankle. You cut that off. You've been somehow managing to keep it all together relatively well, while basically moving through life with one hand tied behind your back.
Yeah.
The future is huge and open and amazing. And like, that's exciting.
Yeah. It's so thrilling. I think we're both geeky coaches in that we totally love, I love to watch the transformation. It's my favorite part of coaching. And that's why we decided to talk about this topic today, because we're both seeing it like time and time again, not just in our own lives, but in the lives of all the women that we work with. So Casey, this has been so good. Again, we could keep talking for forever, but if you were going to give some kind of parting thoughts to someone who's the people who listen to this podcast, some of them aren't struggling with alcohol, some of them are, and many of them are alcohol free now. What would you say to a woman who's feeling the way I was feeling and the way you were feeling, which is kind of this like, on paper, my life looks great. I've got everything, that I thought I ever wanted, but it just feels like something's missing. I'm unhappy. What would you say to them?
Yeah. I mean, I've literally had women say to me, because you do feel like you have a lot of responsibilities, and you do, right? Mm-hmm. I would say to them, you are not meant to put your head down and grit your teeth for another decade of your life. You're meant to be happy. Mm-hmm. And this is about so much more than not drinking alcohol at happy hour. This is about truly transforming into the next phase of your life and doing it for yourself, which doesn't mean that you have to ditch your job. Although a lot of women, decide that they want to do something more like you and I have, or something different, or leave your partner, or you certainly will not, stop taking care of your kids. But it does mean that you get to live your life for yourself, and you get to be happy, and you no longer are sort of incapacitated or mollified by alcohol and operating at half power. And it's exciting. Like I kind of missed that first year, and it was so hard and so difficult, but it was also just such a period of awakening. It was so tender. And I remember talking to my best friend. We were roommates in boarding school when we were 16 years old, and she's the godmother of my kids. I'm the godmother of her kids. We happened to have both moved to Seattle when we were like 23, and I quit at 32. And we were friends that whole time, but we were roommates at 16. And I was about a month sober. And, Glennon talks about how tender that time is. And, you're like a newborn deer fawn. And I said to her, I don't even know who I am anymore. I literally don't, I'm so confused. And she looked at me, we were on a hike, and she said, I feel like I've finally gotten my best friend back. Like, who you were at 16, you're back. And I was just like, that was amazing to me. I mean, I remember it. It's that whole process of unbecoming, everything you thought you had to be, and who you needed to become, and what you needed to do to be successful. And, suddenly I'm that 16-year-old girl in the dorm with my best friend talking into the night, and like, about our dreams and who we are and what we're scared of and our parents and what happened in the childhood. And it was good. That's where you get the tingles.
Yeah, that's so amazing. Thank you for sharing that. I agree with everything that Casey just said. It doesn't need to be this way, and you deserve more. Yeah. Okay. So if you want to know more about Casey, you can find information about her on her hellosomedaycoaching.com website. And I'm also going to share information about Casey's podcast in the show notes with this episode. And also you have a 30-day, tell everybody about your 30
I have a free guide, which is 30 tips for your first month alcohol free. And it's a super in-depth guide. It's like 37 pages long. And there's so much good stuff in there about how you can help make this process easier. So you can just get that at hellosomedaycoaching.com.
Perfect. Well, Casey, thank you so much for agreeing to come on. I've loved this conversation, and I'm just going to start my wheels turning about something else I could talk to you about some other day.
Awesome. I would love that.
So much in common. It's been wonderful. Have a great day.
You've been listening to Bite Size Balance with your host, Wendy McCallum. As a certified Naked Mind coach, I help busy women like you find freedom from alcohol. If you're starting to question your relationship with alcohol, you'll want to listen to my free 3-part video series where I address the top 3 myths around why you think you need to drink. Sign up now at www.wendymccallum.com/myths. That's www.wendymccallum.com/myths.